Well, hello there, everyone. It's Kristi, and it's time for my March hangout with my patrons. And this month, I am joined by Tom, who's been with me since basically the very beginning. I think since my first hangout. So you're really a veteran of these by now. So say hi,
Uh,
Tom.
I do that every time. Hi, folks.
And we are joined this time by a patron of mine who's just joined for the first time, and that's David, and he's located in a country that I also enjoyed living in for several years, the UK. So hi, David. Say hi to the peoples.
Hi to the peoples. Hello, Kristi. Hello, Tom.
Yeah.
Hi.
We were off air talking about what to discuss on air, and of course, it's really hard to sort of exist right now and not talk about Trump. So we're going to talk about Trump, but then we're also going to eventually move over to some British politics because there's some very interesting things developing. So it doesn't matter what side of the Atlantic you're on, there is interesting politics to talk about. But I don't know what we should really start with Trump. Maybe we can just start with the Merkel visit because that might spin into other things. But for those of you who missed it, I don't know, you've probably seen the memes even if you missed the actual event itself. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel visited the United States on the 17th
I
of
saw
March.
that. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all right. And she had a press conference with Trump that went awkwardly. So, David, yeah, did you want to comment on that?
I've not seen anything really about the actual visit to speak of, apart from the photo op where he didn't shake her hand, despite the fact that she clearly sort of suggested to him that they shake hands, and he just kind of
Mhm.
blanked her. And then there was also a bit with a German reporter asking about why Trump all the time, or says things that he knows are not true, and not getting a really, basically he just kind of sort of blew the question off and didn't pay any attention to it. But apart from what they might have actually, discussed between them, and any, sort of hopeful noises that they might be making, I'm not aware of too much else that's come out of that meeting.
One of the other memes that came out of it was during that exchange with the news reporters. And in it, they asked him, the reporter, or German reporters asked him about the wiretapping. And he made reference to the report that came out a couple years ago that the U.S. government had been tapping surveilling German operatives and stuff. They were being spies, on our allies, and that included, I think, her cell phone was tapped, or sometimes like whatever. There was some invasion of privacy, which created quite a kerfuffle because she grew up in East Germany under the state police and the surveillance that they endured under communist regimes. So their communist regime. So he made reference to this about the Obama thing, and she just sort of looked a little bit bemused, and I'm not amused, but like confused. Like, what is he talking
Yeah.
about? And the reporters started laughing, and she got a smile on her face, as well as
Yeah.
people were laughing at the president of the United States for trying to compare his non-existent tapped my wires to what happened.
All right.
There's a
He's...
there's a Go ahead.
No, carry on. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say there's a lot of that laughing going on, and a lot of it is uh, sort of hysterical laughter at God, what the hell do we get ourselves into here? Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah, there is that.
I remember saying in one of his talks about people who genuinely represent is sort of known to be rubbish, sort of paying a social price in ill-concealed laughter or something along the lines. And it seems that Trump is one of these people that sort of provokes that response in people, that he just says things that are just so obviously ridiculous.
Mhm.
People in the room are actually laughing at what he's saying, but it doesn't seem to register with him that that's what's going on. He thinks they're laughing along with him or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does seem to live in his own little bubble.
Yeah.
Tom,
Well,
were
I
you going to
think
say something?
he surrounded himself with yes men all his life. Yes men and yes women. To be fair, he does hire women. Um,
Yeah, a couple,
he,
but not for
yeah.
like cabinet jobs. you know, they're sprinkled
Oh,
around, but they're not sort of
Well,
integrated.
Betsy DeVos
Yeah, and who else?
is,
Oh, I guess
is
wait. What's Senator McConnell's wife's name? I know she's been in Washington
yeah,
forever, and
yeah,
I feel bad her name escapes me, but yeah,
Chu,
it's
Chu. Last
yes,
name I
that's
think
it.
is Chu.
I think
Can't
that's
remember her
right.
first name.
there generally aren't people, whether they're male or female, though, that are sort of, you know, come from a broad pool of people that, you know, Trump seems to know for one reason or another.
Yeah.
You know, either politically or through business connections or just being, you know, a member of the, you know, super wealthy club.
Yeah. I was noticing Kellyanne Conway, his attack dog. Her husband is being is going to be the head of the Civil Department of the Department of Justice. So I mean, this is very incestuous.
A lot of nepotism, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that came up in the German-U.S. meeting, one was a joke that it was a Facebook or Twitter. Someone said a meeting took place at the White House today between the leader of the free world and President Trump.
Yes, I saw that.
But one of the things I know that Trump, I think he tweeted about afterwards, or someone talked about, well, yeah, he did. He mischaracterized it as NATO owing money to the United States. And the fact is that, yeah, there are budgetary commitments of how much of the NATO members' budgets are supposed to be spent on military defense. I think it's supposed to be like 5% by
2%.
Is it 2%? I think it's more. I think it was more than 2%. That was like 5 or.
Well, okay. I just looked that up
They might
before
be
we
at
went in here.
2% now.
I
I think they
think
might be at 2%.
Yeah, the German response to
now.
that, to his saying that, was that the requirement was 2% towards international defense initiatives, but that includes NATO and peacekeeping and a number of other things that all go into that 2%. So you can't just take 2% and say that has to be the donation to NATO directly. That's what the article was saying. That's what the Germans were saying about Trump not understanding how this all works.
Yes, and that's it's expose the fact that he doesn't know what he's talking about yet again.
Yeah. He's not very bright.
He just has to open his mouth to expose the fact that he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that there's going to come a time when we're going to need to believe the president about something.
Yeah.
And we're not going to be able to. And that's a problem. Well, you know, I was thinking when you guys were talking earlier, there was a game that's been out actually for a really long time. It's called Diplomacy. And it's a board. Yeah, it's the map of Europe right before World War I. And it's a turn-based game, and it's less about like rolling. There's no dice rolling, nothing like that. What you have to do is negotiate, because you need like at least 7 people to play. And I was thinking, right now, if you had the political situation, what country would you want to start as? And you'd want to start as Russia, because right now Putin is getting pretty much everything he wants in terms of NATO arguing with itself, Turkey having tense relationships with European countries, the United States being led by somebody who isn't committed to NATO or aggressively checking Russian meddling and the other things they're doing. And he's sitting really pretty because Trump is messing a lot of things up. And his big espionage operation to undermine the election and get the candidate he wanted was a success. I think someone referred to it as probably the most successful intelligence operation in history.
Yeah.
I think it's even worse than that, without wanting to be a complete doomsayer. I think his plan all along was just to create chaos. I don't think he really cared who, so long as there was chaos afterwards. And the US administration now, and I think I genuinely think that because of Trump and because of his support base, would have won the election, there would still be chaos now because of who the opposition. Putin, just sowed the seeds for, sort of administrative chaos in the US, and he's basically got what he wanted, which was, a less effective opposition to Russian expansionism.
I think you've got that entirely correct. Jason Chaffetz, who was heading up one of the Benghazi investigations, was saying just weeks before the actual election took place back in November that they had enough material to continue their investigation for 2 years. And right after Trump was elected, they just dropped the entire Benghazi thing. So you're right. If it hadn't been Trump, it would have been Clinton basically being hauled up before hearings as often as Congress could, subpoena her.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So that's depressing.
Yeah. Thanks,
But
David.
on a more smiley note, sort of Trump related, my dad today was telling me that he had watched the meme about the professor who was interrupted by his kids and his wife.
Oh, yeah.
But where they had put Sean Spicer's face on the professor and Trump on the little girl, and she walks into the room, and on the wife's face was Kellyanne Conway, and the baby was Ben Carson. So yeah, even my dad was like watching memes because they were on television apparently. So
yeah,
it's some good comedy.
And wasn't there I also saw, I think it was probably a British send up with this, or can you hear me?
Yeah,
hello.
You were kind of breaking up for a second there, but you're back again.
Okay, because things changed all of a sudden, and I can see myself now. Yeah. It said you unmuted me, and then my camera came on, and I don't know what's going on.
You were cracking a beer or something. You were cracking an old Milwaukee or something.
I don't drink, but if I drank, I think I'd be.
Oh yeah.
I'd be more. No, I wouldn't. I'd have a PBR.
I was trying to grasp for like what's the most common kind of beer you could in Plover, Wisconsin, and I reached for Old Milwaukee, but you're right, PBR me ASAP is probably more culturally relevant.
That's what I drank when I first started drinking beer as an 18-year-old. It was I like it. I don't what can I say? And now I can't remember what I was talking about.
I'm currently working my way through a bottle of Innocent Gun, so just to sort of throw my hat in the ring for the beer conversation.
Oh, what was that again? Sorry, David.
I'm drinking a bottle of. It's a Scottish brewery.
There we go.
It's oak aged beer, and it's delicious.
Yeah, I'm always, of course, when I compare American beers and British beers, I'm reminded of that classic line from Monty Python at the Hollywood Bowl. They're playing the two Australians who were asking one of them, Bruce, asked the other one, Bruce, how is American beer like making love in a canoe? It's fucking close to water.
There we go.
Okay.
There are a lot of ways you could go. Actually, I remember when I was 17, I spent a summer in Austria, and I think I mentioned this, at a German language school. And we were strictly told we could not drink, so we did, of course. And there's a beer, I don't know if I think the name of the beer was Schlosser, that I really liked. And when I got back, I tried several beers here, and PBR was the one closest to what I remembered. So that's where I thought there was a certain cachet to PBR, aside from being an American beer.
Right. Well,
Wisconsin beer.
My dad visits me about every other year, and the first year here, he started to partake of the local brew that we have, Kölsch, and other German beers too, and other European beers. And he said by the end of his trip, he's like, I'm going to have to start drinking Heineken when I go back to Wisconsin, because I can't go back to the American beers right away. I've got to make a transition from European to American.
I used to work at the University of Leicester in the in the sort of admin, one of the admin departments, a culture for sort of lunchtime drinking in the student union bar for the admin staff. And I found it was safer as far as continuing to work effectively during the afternoon if I drank Budweiser instead of any of the British or European beers that were on offer.
Yeah, instead of beer, you had Budweiser.
Oh, this is so much more enjoyable than talking about Trump.
Yeah, yeah.
But,
And even at that, I'm a non-drinker now, so I can't. You know, I'm getting all these good ideas for. Oh man, I could get a taste for X, Y, Z, and we get much more imported beer over here than we did when I was drinking, and we also have a lot more better beers, craft beers, and that I could probably find several that I really enjoyed, and now I can't. But maybe
there's an app you can get for your phone that it's got like complete lists of all the sort of craft beers and really nice real ales that you can get in, and it's all sort of location specific and tells you where all the breweries are and where you can buy them. And then you can get little achievements as well for all the beers that you go out and buy, and it's like sort of Pokemon for
for drinkers. Well, my son drinks. He likes beer and some wines and some whiskeys and rums. So maybe I could get those achievements by getting stuff for him. Vicariously. Yeah.
No, I mean, I've got
probably not as.
Go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
Probably not safe for me to do that, but there's a thought.
Yeah. I was actually saying, well, when you talk about being exposed to other things, I am a really big fan of this Australian kitchen show, My Kitchen Rules, which I know that they've copied in the US, but they've done it so bad. They've made it so American. Oh my gosh, it's so American now. But anyway, the interesting thing about the show is that I learn a lot about Australian food and how like they have these things called I think Moreton Bay bugs, which are kind of lobster but are indigenous to that area, and it's really kind of exposed me to a lot of different flavor combinations and ways to think about food. So I think that's when you talk about, I'm trying to make some parallels to get it away from alcohol, but
don't worry about it.
Yeah, we you have more crafty beers now, you have more local things, people are sharing information and getting a higher quality product and a higher quality experience. And I think that's one of the nice things about the digital age, is that we have that instant communication.
Which is
so oh yeah, go ahead, Tom. Sorry, you paused, so I wasn't sure if you were done or.
I'm enjoying this, and then I had a thought when we were talking about all this melange of cultures and bringing people together. And I had this thought: fucking Trump. What's he doing he's pushing this America first, everybody else, pushing everybody else away. So he's working entirely against that whole bringing people together business. And it's I'm going to have to start thinking about getting looking into these, like that cooking show and things like that do bring cultures together rather than separate them, because it's so hard here. I have a relative that I like quite a bit, but she voted for Trump, and she's still very much on his side. And she said quite directly that she likes the America First, and she likes the idea of not having people who are different than her in the country. And I guess when you see it in your family, it's is distressing. But it's a window on. But on the other hand, I had a discussion with her the other day on Facebook about universal health care. And I posted a meme about how with check boxes for all the first world countries that have universal health care, and then an X in a box for the U.S. because we don't. We're the only one in this whole big list that doesn't have that. And we had an actual discussion about that, and she was not sure that she said she liked the idea, but who would pay for it, and it wouldn't work in a country like the U.S. and blah blah. And we actually got to the point where she was saying, yeah, that I talked to her about how it works in other countries and how it might work here, and she got to the point where she said, yeah, I'm on board now. I think we should have universal health care. And we have the actual Brit here. How do you feel about not maybe the NHS in detail, but the idea of universal health care there?
I was born into a country with a national health service, and it's free at the point of use, and it just kind of seems like the most obvious thing for any sort of progressive and at least sort of nominally or practically secular country to want to do, is in that any country that's sort of more religiously biased would not want to do that. But if you're a country like the UK that is very, despite the setup with the Queen being the head of the church and whatnot, that itself population wise is pretty much sort of gone off the board as far as being sort of deeply religious. But yeah, the NHS is something that I've grown up with, and it's something that just seems like it's obvious it should be there. And other countries with sort of a universal healthcare system, it's like, well, yes, that's what you do when when you move up the sort of the civilizational ladder. It's
if I could, kind of, as someone who's straddled both cultures, to try to explain you guys to each other. So I think it's important to remember that where the NHS came from, what gave it birth, and that was the post-war period. And Britain had been attacked, it had been bombed, and it had been affected by the war in a way. Even though America had sent soldiers, and we had Pearl Harbor, we didn't have war on our doorstep, and we didn't have any attacks. We didn't have bomb raids the way that they did in London, for instance. And so the notion of the country coming together after the war and rebuilding, I think there was a sense of purpose still, especially in light of victory and identification and unity, and that underpinned the basic moral position that people should have access to healthcare. And America's never had that moment where we've had the New Deal after or during the Great Depression, because poverty was just so out of control, and Social Security has been the most successful government program at keeping people who are elderly out of poverty. It's a phenomenally successful program, but we kind of always means tested it, or it was always directed at the poorest and neediest. It wasn't considered something we should all have, which is a sense of security about our retirement, our retirement income or spending. So I think that's where the two countries in particular, when we compare the US and the UK. Now, of course, other European countries I think also had sort of similar stories, but the UK is the one that I would be more familiar with in any case.
I think from my point of view as well, I think it goes to sort of a more kind of sort of meta ideology as well, that your most important resource as a nation and if you're not investing in the health and well-being and education of your population, doing it right, really, you're failing in some way, and that failure will will bite you in the arse at some point in time. It might not be immediate, but it will come back, and that failure to really properly take care of your population is basic requirement for being a viable state that has got a future, I think.
I would say
Yeah,
America. Oh, I'm just going to be quick, Tom, and then I'll let you speak.
Yeah.
I think in America, the notion is that those kinds of rights are legal, and then you're thrown into a capitalist system that's supposed to be a meritocracy. So yeah, go ahead, Tom. Your turn.
Oh, I several things. First, I want to go back, David, if you don't mind. You mentioned that the idea of universal health care, taking care of your people, I don't know if you would say easier or more justified in a secular society than a religious one. And I'm just curious about that, because it sort of fits, because we are a very religious society, although we're definitely more theoretically secular than you guys. We are very much more religious than you. And I'm wondering if you how you saw that the dichotomy between religion and secular playing out in doing things for the people more reasonable.
I don't think being a more religious country necessarily makes the country less inclined to do these kind of things, but it potentially throws up sort of ideological roadblocks or theological roadblocks to those more kind of sort of secular and sort of broader humanist type policies and implementations of structures within society. That because if well, with a lot of religions, there just simply are things that delineate and diminish people within whole sort of groups, whether it's based on a sect or cultural practices or just the idea that some people are going to hell, and whatever it is that divides people based on your religious ideology is going to be something that's going to get in the way of providing healthcare. For instance, the debate in the US about providing safe and legal abortion. The only argument against that is coming from the religious right.
Right.
And that's something that that impacts on everybody, regardless of religion or non-religion. It's one of the most obvious kind of examples, I suppose, but there's plenty of stem cell research and a whole bunch of other things where religion is getting in the way, and it's not getting in the way for
right.
Yeah, and quite a lot of hospitals in the United States are, Catholic hospitals, and so there's the mixing there, because again, with the frontier and manifest destiny expansionist colonization agenda that was characterized in the sort of early part of American history, people use the church as in lieu of social services. So there wasn't any sort of foster system except for the ones, or orphanages, except for the ones the churches set up. And that tradition continued, whereas in the UK, the state took over those functions. And then again, there wasn't the necessary division between like healthcare as charity versus people on the basis of your citizenship being entitled to having access to basic healthcare to stay alive as a human right, so.
Yeah, Oh man, so many things. Yeah, I think when you talk, Kristi, you were talking about manifest destiny. I was also thinking of the ideal of rugged individualism, the the Marlboro man, the lone cowboy taking care of business all on his own, and that's sort of a libertarian ideal that is a very deep strain in the U.S. And you put that together with, as you were saying, David, with religions that are are divided into various bubbles, and they don't necessarily see the other. In religious terms, they don't always see the other as, I guess, fully human almost. Certainly not correct and doctrinally pure, which is the ideal. It and after World War II, where Britain went in the direction of National Health Service, and we're all in this together, let's rebuild together. After World War II, we started getting more individual healthcare plans, mostly through employers. And so it was all fragmented from the very beginning. People would buy into Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and they could afford to do that because the medical costs were very, very low at that time. But over time, as costs have increased, that the idea of people taking care of themselves and being responsible for their own health care has not changed in the sync, in the sync with the cost of healthcare and the catastrophe that will happen if you have, if you are underinsured or don't have any insurance and you have one big bad thing happen to you. In this last year, I've had several surgeries, and if I didn't have Medicare and Medicaid, I would not have had some of those, probably any of those, and I would be in very, very tough shape right now.
Yeah.
And yet, if people like
Could
Paul
you just
Ryan, go ahead. I'm sorry. I tend to wander. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you could just, I'm not entirely clear about what's the difference between Medicare and Medicaid, and
Yeah,
it's not something I've read enough into to be really clear about what the difference there is.
yeah. Medicare is what you pay into your whole life, like Social Security. It's when you get your paycheck, you have deductions for Social Security and for Medicare. And when you turn whatever age, and the Republicans keep wanting to increase that age all the time, when you turn retirement age, you get Social Security and you're covered by Medicare. Medicare covers 80% of it covers 80% of covered of what they say the price should be for this, and they discount it pretty deeply from what the hospitals and doctors charge. And then most people buy a Medicare supplement policy to cover the other 20%. Medicaid, on the other hand, is for low income people with children that have disabilities, people who are disabled themselves. And I've been on Medicaid through disability for quite a while, and that just maintained when I went into Medicare and Social Security retirement a few years ago. So it's Medicaid is more of a welfare dole kind of, not dole, but more of a welfare kind of thing that goes to specific groups of people that are needy. Medicare is what everybody gets when they have paid into it and they turn a certain age.
So it's, you could think
Okay.
about it as care is care for everyone, but aid is aid to the poor, Medicaid. And that's what the Medicaid
There you go.
expansion was tied with the Obamacare bill. And the idea was that all the states would expand people who would be eligible for Medicaid by increasing the thresholds or whatever else. But a lot of states, a lot of Republican-led states, refused that money and left their populations under or uninsured.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's how that works.
Yeah, it's a lot of that was poking Obama in the eye, hurting the population over a political fight.
Yeah.
Irritates the hell out of me.
So, was there more in this direction that we wanted to go at, or should we switch over to the topic of Scottish independence, maybe an indie ref 2? You guys ready?
Oh, let's do that.
Oh,
All right.
can I just
Yeah.
Yeah, you can finish up. We're not over. It was just raise the topic. So
there was just a swerve point back there that we kind of missed, but it's probably just as well. But I was just going to go from the beer conversation to Paul Ryan with his pint.
oh yes, please do.
And then from the pint of Guinness to the Irish Prime Minister giving Donald Trump basically a lecture about immigration.
Yeah.
Which I thought was nice.
He had a really bad St. Patrick's Day. He got sent out by the Irish Prime Minister, and then Merkel gave him that, "Are you talking to me? Look." So no, that was a great tie-in. So bringing it over to Europe from the States back over. Yeah, this week or in the last couple of days, she's her official title is First Minister, right? Nicola Sturgeon. I should know this, but I've fallen off of British politics a little bit since Trump got elected. Yes, I want to make sure I got
First Minister of Scotland. Yeah.
First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon announced that she sort of basically said wants there to be a second referendum, and that would be grounded on the fact that there is a material change in the relationship between Scotland and the rest of the UK based on the fact that people have voted to leave the EU, and Scotland voted to stay in the EU, as well as the long-running other Scottish complaints. So, since we have someone who, yes, so it was live and in the nation, in the UK. Not the nation affected, because there's a difference. Oh, but yeah, so nation, I think country is UK. Well, Great Britain and Northern Ireland is the UK, and then you've got Britain, which is Great Britain, and then you've got the nations inside. And so, yes, David, you said you have some opinions on this subject, and I, as someone who studies British politics, am always interested in listening to the opinions of people who are of eligible voting age in the UK talk about politics. So please make my night.
Well, I don't know about that, but I should certainly qualify what I'm about to say with, I say because I'm English, once you go north of the border, counts for absolutely nothing.
That's
whether
true.
people agree with it or not.
But yes, down south, what are the opinions? What's your opinion?
Yeah. I think Nicola Sturgeon is ideologically committed to Scottish independence, and it didn't matter what the result of the Brexit vote was. She was going to find a way to spin it into another independence referendum for Scotland. I don't think Theresa May, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, has any right to deny the people of Scotland, if they so with referendum, whether or not it's now or 18 months down the line or years down the line. Whenever the people of Scotland decide that we want to be able to have a referendum on where our future as a country should lie, and it's for them to make that decision, and it's not for the UK government to stand in the way of that, which is what Theresa May's did. Theresa May, since Brexit, has been basically a roadblock to any and every conversation beyond screeching of brakes crashing out of the EU, and she will not discuss with anybody anything other than do things my way or like I say, Nicola Sturgeon is, completely, ideologically, sort of grounded in the idea of Scottish independence. She may or may not get her wish. I don't think at the moment the Scottish people are swayed by her arguments. I think there's certainly an argument to be made about that when Scottish independence was, when the referendum for Scottish independence was held a couple of years back, that it was under some sort of assumption that they would continue to be members of the EU.
Mm-hmm.
And to now sort of say, well, that's all changed, and we should now be able to hold another independence referendum based on whatever the UK deal with the EU turns out to be, is a fair point.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a
Yeah, I
position
think
on the first Indie Rough vote?
on the Scottish independence referendum.
Yeah, when it was run in 2014.
Yeah, I'm kind of one of those sort of right slap bang in the middle with it, really. I consider myself to be, well, I've got multiple identities, and one of the identities that I hold is being a UK citizen. Scots are part of the UK and have been for, a very long time, and they culturally are very significant in how the rest of us who aren't Scottish see ourselves, and I appreciate part in that sort of larger cultural sort of tapestry, and how it how it affects me. So from that point of view, I'd say I'd like them to stay, but I don't want to be that says from a sort of a colonial position south of the border that they shouldn't have that option. If that's what they want to do, they should be allowed to do.
Right. Well, that seems very reasonable.
Yeah.
So, Tom, do you want to say a few things before I jump in and be all like academic-y and ask?
Well, yeah, I'm. My name is Scottish. My grandfather was Scottish. His father was in the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders in India under Queen Victoria. So I have some feelings about Scotland. I saw Braveheart several times. I've been to Stirling, up to the Wallace Monument, and so I was stirred by that. And romantically, I think it would be really neat to have an independent Scotland. And certainly with the Brexit, the change in status with the whole Brexit vote, and how Scotland didn't vote for it, or voted, the majority didn't vote for it. It makes sense to have another referendum on that basis. But just pragmatically, I don't know whether I just don't know. I don't know the details enough to know economically whether Scotland can make it as an independent nation. I'm sure they could. They're big enough and diverse enough. They can do it. They got oil. But whether they would be limping along, or whether even they might be in a better position vis-a-vis Europe. People might want to do more business in Scotland after the rest of the UK goes, bye-bye from the EU. So I don't know enough. I have this romantic attachment. I'm also English and Irish, so I'm terribly confused. So go ahead, Kristi, and tell us that, or David, tell us that.
say just on the something that occurred to me on the point of Scottish independence, that the people probably ideologically committed to Scottish independence, it's not something that's got sort of roots in living or very recent memory. So from that point of view, I don't quite understand it. It's not like East Germany and West Germany reuniting. You've got people in living memory who, you know, who considered themselves, you know, sort of being part of the same place. So, you know, there's nobody in Scotland living now that remembers a time when Scotland used to, you know, sort of its own thing. And even going back many generations, that situation never existed. So to be really deeply committed to the idea of Scottish independence is something I find a little hard to really get my head around. But having said that, you know, if that's what they want to do.
Well, I think you might reckon without the deep cultural memory that the Scots harbor. I'm MacDonald, and our clan, a sept of our clan, the MacDonalds of Glencoe, were pretty close to wiped out by English troops that were stationed with them, you know, in their homes a couple hundred years ago, and that is very fresh for us. I say us, I mean McDonald's, and there are tons and tons of things like that. You know, our music is filled with memories of beating the British or the English, or being beaten by them and then coming back and beating them the next time, that sort of thing. So
I certainly recognise that there's a lot of history there of, you know, certainly oppression by the English of the Scottish. But like I say, a lot of it is, you know, much further back than, you know, the memories of anybody living. So
I mean,
it's like there's a detachment there that.
Well, I think it depends on the level of nationalism, doesn't it? And so, and you know, when I think of a song like "The Fields of Athenry," and the emotions that evokes, and there's nothing that, you know, lasts longer than a grudge.
And we are good at that. We are very good at grudges.
I remember talking to somebody in Wales. Actually, I was doing focus groups in 2010, and it was a younger man. He was going to school there at Aberystwyth. Aberystwyth, I think it was. And he was voting Plaid Cymru, and he had always sort of supported Labour before. He was maybe in his early 20s, so he only had like one election to vote for or whatever before that, because he was a slightly older student. It's coming back to me now. But he got interested in Welsh history, and through reading the history and of English oppression, he became more, he identified more strongly with his Welsh heritage and actually moved from voting Labour over to Plaid Cymru. So I think the way that people emote in terms of nationalism, I think especially Americans can understand an emotional nationalism. And I think the English, because of the taint of the National Front and the associations with the English flag that have only recently been reclaimed by mainstream English people, and you can fly your flag and not be worried that people are going to think you're a skinhead under your hat. There might be slightly different notions. And of course, there are Scottish people who don't want to, who would vote no on a referendum too. But if you want to talk about those who are the most passionate, the kinds of people that I saw in my focus groups in Scotland, so there are narratives out there, and people kind of pick up different narratives, I would say.
Yeah, I would be a horrible Scot, because I would be I'd be painting my face blue. I'd be wearing, you know, a plaidie, not a pre-made kilt. I'd get myself a longsword. Oh man, I would be a horrible modern Scot.
Well, I don't have a dog in the fight because, you know, I'm one, American, and two, you know, I don't get a vote. So my opinion really doesn't count. And I don't have a firm stance. But what I do have is, one, I have a lot of empathy for the alienation that I've heard coming from people in my focus groups, both in 2010 and in 2015. And I'll give you actually an empirical example, because we're working on this paper and we're going to get it published soon, if we could just find the time to write it up and submit it again. But when I was doing the focus groups in 2010, it was the first time that it was like a prime minister debate or a leaders debate, whatever. And they had the three main party leaders all on stage debating each other. And in the Scottish focus groups, a couple of people pointed out that during the debate, they would have a discussion about, let's say, education policy. And the three leaders would talk about education policy and what they were going to do, and the policies that they were going to enact, and how they were going to get affect education in Britain, in the UK. And one of the women pointed out, like, I just tune out because, that's a devolved power in Scotland. So if that 5 minutes was wasted for me, because that has nothing to do with my life, because we make those decisions, not Westminster. And from that, we actually, my colleague and I, we went through the transcripts for the three leader debates. And we looked at how many times so they did name dropping of various cities, as politicians are wont to do. Oh, I was in Birmingham at a mill and I met a man, that kind of thing. And we counted them up, and like David Cameron and Nick Clegg had mentioned like 17 different cities over the course of the three debates. Gordon Brown mentioned far fewer, like 4 or 6 or something. And of those, David Cameron never mentioned a non-English city. Nick Clegg mentioned Cardiff once, and Gordon Brown mentioned Scotland the most, but that's only because he was referencing his own constituency in Scotland. He wasn't talking about other cities in Scotland. He was talking about where he came from. And if you look at it, who mentioned the word devolution or said, this is a devolved power? Only the moderator said the word devolution or devolved powers. And the other thing, too, is that none of the party leaders made any reference to either the Scottish Parliament or the Welsh Assembly. So if you were to listen to that debate and you were in England, it would all make sense to you because it was all about you. Anywhere but England, they weren't talking to you, or they were only talking to you part of the time, and then even then they weren't really acknowledging you. So when the Scots say to me in the focus groups, people who say this, like, we have had conservative Tory government, except for when we had Labour for that brief stint, and when we had Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, and they were pretty much focused on England again, they constantly vote for Labour Party majorities, or more recently the SNP, and yet they get governed by Tories over and over and over again. So their democratic efficacy is far less than they would be if they were independent and had their own shot. So I have a lot of sympathy for the fact that Scots are told they're wanted, but they're not treated like they're wanted in terms of how the politicians conceive of what the UK is. And the UK is mostly London and England.
Our electoral system is a complete shambles, and we were frankly nobbled by the last coalition government.
Yeah, with the AV vote.
That was designed to fail, and
yeah,
we were very shortchanged on that.
So yeah,
we
just
need
as
to
background,
replace our voting system.
Yeah, in 2010, when the coalition between the Lib Dems and the Conservatives came together, one of the conditions was they would have a vote about how voting itself is done in Britain, and they came up with a proposal for the alternate vote system, which is not intuitive and kind of confusing, and in the end most people didn't understand it or the impact it would have, even though people vote in European elections, which are way more complicated to figure out who gets represented to the EU. I still don't understand the maths on all of that, but yeah, as opposed to doing a PR system or something closer to what other successful European democracies have,
I'd go for the transferable vote for if there was a referendum where it gave you all the options and sort of a bullet pointed, here's how this system works, here's how this system works. When you look at the maths of it, the transferable vote system is sort of far and away the best of a bad bunch of sort of representative of voting.
Yeah.
There isn't a perfect way of doing it, but
no, every system's going to have a flaw. But first past the post does produce really weird outcomes, and sometimes undemocratic outcomes. But so on the other side, though, so there's the passionate side for Scottish independence. But of course, that's not why it really failed. I don't think, in my opinion, in the last time around, it failed because they couldn't answer basic questions on the monetary system and what would happen to pensions, and what would the tax rate be, and what would the budget be, and and what would their relationships with Europe be. And so, even if the timing of this for Nicola or Miss Sturgeon, I shouldn't be so familiar with her. The fact is that if they haven't organized their policies in a way where they can provide answers instead of hand waving, well, we'll figure that out once it's all said and done. Even if things if independence went through and things changed, that would be damn. But you need to have clear answers to people's pension questions and healthcare questions and education. So it's if they're still not able to answer the practical questions, then the second NDREF I think will go the same way as the first one, because people won't vote for uncertainty, in my opinion.
But then, but I don't. People can say whatever they want in a campaign. In the Brexit vote, as I understand it, the exiteers, not exiters, but the exiteers, were making a big deal about that money that goes to the EU Parliament would go to the NHS. And then afterwards, after the Brexit vote, the people, Farage and some other folks said, "Oh, that was never going to happen. That was just to get you to vote for us." So I guess I'm wondering, in a system like that, how can you, in the next vote, taking all everything that you both have been saying, how can people trust what they're hearing?
That will, come down to, I think, in terms of, well, I'm sorry, I'll babble, David, and then I'll let you go. Just again, kind of doing a sampling. There is when it comes to uncertainty, again, and this is a situation where perception is reality. The people who were emotionally for yes were always going to be for yes. And so it was really on the people who were wavering, who could see the idea of independence is attractive, but really didn't know how it would impact their retirement. If they were 5 years away from retirement or 15 years away from retirement, and they lived in Scotland their whole life, and they've had, a pension with the UK government, well, what happens to my pension? If you can't answer that question, then they're never going to vote for a system that's going to possibly take that away. So, it's not so much about always having the exact right answer, and I don't think it's about lying either, but they need to have credible answers that were generated by, economists and people who are advisors and white papers and plans for, transitioning whatever else. They have a lot of devolved powers already. So it would be a matter of, quite narrowly defining areas where they would be reclaiming power from Westminster, and to what extent they would just say, we're going to start from a position of British law, and then if we need to change or whatever else they decide to do, but they need to be able to answer the questions to get from, what was it, 54% said no last time. And the other thing too is the last time around, the majority of the no voters were English. But if you have a lot of English people who want to stay in the EU, that could soften that no too. So lots of things. Sorry, I'm babbling, and I think it was David's turn next.
I think on just a quick point on the information that was available either to the Scottish independence referendum and the EU referendum. The information was, it certainly seemed to me from the reading that I was doing at the time, the Scots had way better and way more thought out, just better considered information available to them to actually make the decision on whether or not that information swayed them one way or the other, than the information that was swirling around during the EU referendum, which was just, from both sides of that argument, it was just garbage. It was...
Yeah, and that was also a complaint that I know when we talked to people post-Brexit vote, that there was a feeling that they didn't, from a lot of people, they're like, I just want somebody like on the BBC, I don't want to get a pro or anti-Brexit person. I just want an economist to come on and talk about the what's going to happen. And on the one hand, I get that because you want neutral information, but on the other hand, you're asking people to predict the future, you know. So economists aren't great with Wall Street and predicting bubbles. Yes,
Yeah.
but there is something to be said that people felt like all the information coming through was quite partisan, you know, and that there was a lack of you know, experts. Didn't one of the Brexiters say, you know, people don't want experts anymore or something along those lines?
Oh boy.
Yeah, and in Scotland, there emerged an entire sort of alternate media. So as yes people, because a lot of the national papers and the parties, quite a lot, so you know the big parties opposed independence, people were getting frustrated with how things were being covered because they felt that their voices weren't being heard, that numbers of protesters in favor of independence were being underestimated, and they were getting short shrift, and so there emerged alternative locations like online Wings Over Scotland became a place where people would go and get coverage and socially network. So just like in the US where you have two media bubbles that people live in, the right-wing media bubble and the mainstream media bubble, in the Scottish referendum, for the people who were the most committed to yes, they almost lived exclusively in that sort of Wings Over Scotland. I have people who refused to pay their TV license because they didn't want to give any money to the BBC anymore. They were so angry over the bias of the BBC. Yeah, so I'm wandering on a tangent now just because I'm talking about my research and I get really excited about that.
Yeah, I
I
know.
think it's fun. But yeah,
David went
so
away.
but they did have like people were on Facebook and Twitter, people who were, you know, you would never sort of you know, a typical Facebook user, you wouldn't think of a 68-year-old grandmother. But you know, people were on there using it because of the independence referendum, because they couldn't get information just by turning on BBC Radio 4. They felt, and so it drove them into social media and networking in a way that I don't know that the no side really saw.
Hmm. So Scots are really superior. I like that.
Well, they did turn out at like 84%. Oh no, we lost David at some point.
Yeah, yeah. A little
So
while
he might
ago.
drop out.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
I
hope he can
didn't. I
get
was so
back.
busy talking, and yeah, I didn't even notice.
Yeah.
I feel bad now. But yeah, they had an insane like 84% turnout in that independence referendum, and it was one of my favorite. So when we do our focus groups, when we do them before and after the elections, and we always start well first by saying nobody has to tell me how. No one has to say how they voted. Your vote is secret, but we'd like to know the story about your day. And basically, everyone is fine. Like once the result is called, you know, nobody's objected to, but they could. And one young man, it was the first time he voted, and he told the story about he got up that day and he was so excited and he was like walking on his way to the polling station. There were so many people who were going in and out and people were looking really happy. And he said he went in, he got his, you know, ballot and he went and cast his vote. And he said he got shivers and he sort of like voted for independence for his country. And he spent the whole day just sort of bubbling, you know, like walking on air, really excited because he was in Glasgow, which was a yes city. So it was kind of a bubble in and of itself. Glasgow and Dundee, I think, were some of the two highest yes votes in the whole country. But yeah, then his hopes sadly were crushed as the result came in. So
damn Sassenachs.
I only know that because I watched that. What was that silly sort of romantic adventure, Outlander? I think it was about a woman who sort of goes back in time to Scotland and the Jacobean, right before the Jacobean.
Oh yeah, yeah. The word, yeah, yeah. I am at least as much Sassenach as I am Gaelic, but
Yeah.
but I identify with the romantic Highland stuff. And my people actually were Highland and Islanders, so you know, West Scotland, Hungary.
And it's lovely. Yeah, we've got a conference in the spring, so I'll be back in Glasgow springtime, and I love it. I mean, I love both Glasgow and Edinburgh, and spending time in Dundee too. I've sort of become affectionate when it comes to Dundee, but Edinburgh to me is always just when you get into the old town, and you're just going along. I don't know if you call them the wines or the winds. I think the wines, what they're
Yeah,
called.
mines. Yeah.
Gosh, it's just like you could just close your eyes and hear the horse hooves on the stone, and
Yes.
hear the bustle of the city, and get to go past the church where John Knox preached. That's sort of, yeah,
Yeah.
horrible
Yeah. Yes.
preacher, a predilection
Yes.
for teenage wives, no matter how old he was. Yeah, and to be in the room where Mary gave birth to James, and the first, and James the fifth,
Hmm.
Scotland. Yeah, it's just
That's in the
yeah,
castle, isn't it?
yeah, that's in
Is
the
that?
castle.
Yeah.
I've done the castle tour several times. I just love it. I really, really, really like.
Yeah. I've been there. I was there when I was there in grad school, about 80, and then I was there again with my son in 2000, and it's I really love that the castle. I like the 1 o'clock gun too.
Yeah.
Very Scottish, Theoretically, it would be more reasonable to fire it at noon, but that's 12 charges of powder. You wait an hour and it's one charge of powder. So it's very Scottish.
Well, I'm hoping to get to the Fringe for the first time ever, because I live so close, and I actually have a friend who can put me up. I didn't kind of realize that,
Ooh.
yeah, I could just, sleep on my friend's couch for a while. So I'm planning on heading up. I mean, it's 4 weeks long, so I don't know when I'll
Yeah.
go. And I was really hoping to see Dick Coughlin, and wrote him
Oh.
like, "What are you playing?" He's like, "I'm not doing the Fringe this year." You bastard.
Oh no.
So I won't be able to see him, but I'm sure the Fringe will be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So we'll see.
I'd be very curious as to what you had for the facepalm moment.
Oh, right. Yes. So I still have this up. Yep. All right. So this is coming from Fox News. It reads, "End Bible classes. West Virginia school seeks to dismiss atheist lawsuit." A West Virginia school district is being sued for offering an elective Bible class and has filed a motion to dismiss the suit brought by an atheist group. Mercer County Schools is being sued by the Wisconsin-based
Yay. Yep.
Freedom from Religion Foundation for offering a course called Bible in the Schools since 1939. The First Liberty Institute, a Texas-based legal firm, filed a motion to dismiss earlier this week on behalf of the school district. In their motion, First Liberty argued that the Freedom from Religion Foundation lawsuit should be dismissed, in part because the plaintiffs lack the standing to sue Mercer County Schools. The purported harm plaintiffs allege are merely speculative, resulting from the choices the plaintiffs say that they may have to make well into the future and related to potential ostracism that is grounded only in speculation, not in fact.
Oh boy.
In January, FFRF filed a lawsuit against Mercer County for offering an elective Bible course that has existed in some capacity since 1939. This program advances and endorses one religion, improperly entangles public schools in religious affairs, and violates the personal conscience of non-religious and non-Christian parents and students, read the lawsuit. So I'll put a link to that in the description box below. But yeah, so Christians are trying to fight back by challenging standing and harm.
Yeah, harm is if you're a Christian, I think the harm is very, very difficult to understand. Uh, Being ostracized for being different, um, they don't understand it because they've never been, or at least not on the basis of religion, um, and probably not even race in a lot of these places.
My
Oh boy.
thoughts on this my thoughts on this are that it really, to me, would come down to the content of the course. Now, if it was taught from like a critical theory point of view, where the Bible was looked at as literature,
Mhm.
and it was examined for instance, the fact that a lot of proverbs is plagiarized wisdom literature from the Egyptians. They found the originals. That the
Yeah.
creation story is taken from other ancient sources. Canaanite, I think, is it the Epic of Gilgamesh? Is that where? I can't remember where the creation story came from now, but somebody in the comments will correct me.
Yeah.
I'm sure. um, then it's educational, an attempt to convert or promote the faith. However, if it's taught about, if it says, the Bible in schools, and it's the whole history of why the Bible should be in the schools in America, because Moses or something, then it's indoctrination. So
I have to think that the FFRF, in my understanding, FFRF does not oppose teaching the Bible as literature, or
yeah, I'm sure they would.
in critical. So I'm thinking the probability here is that they are teaching it in a doctrinal, this is the way to go way. And the other thing too is if they're teaching the Bible, why are they not teaching a comparative religion course? Or why don't they have also, since this is an elective, why don't they have an elective for, for Islam, an elective for Judaism, elective, or an elective for, comparative religion in general? My hunch is that that would not go over very well in that town.
Right, because I think, there might be, maybe the legal team out of Texas will say in defense of the school that it's an elective course, therefore people don't have to take it, therefore it's not violating anyone's conscience or anything. But, the Constitution's pretty clear that government shall not establish a religion. And so if you have a doctrinal course, even if it's elective, then again, it's like having a Christian club at school. Then you got to open it up to, you need a Satanism course, if people can teach it, offer it and want it, and how those decisions are made can't be up to just everybody in the room is a Christian, and there has to be educational merit to it. So I think this is probably, with the idea of it being an elective course, is maybe how they're going to try to slide out of this. But on the other hand, if you're using state resources,
here's David again. Hello, David.
Hello.
Hey, good to have you back.
We missed you. I missed you.
Huh?
How
long it's going to last? I've got my phone on charge. It just died on me, the battery. It misreports my battery status by some...
Yeah, the mobile, it does really just suck the energy really fast out of that. All those information coming in and out warms up the battery and drains it. So we were just speculating there's a case working its way in a U.S. court where a West Virginia school district has an elective course on the Bible. I think I read the title correctly. It was called In Schools or something. And there's an atheist, a secular group that's saying it violates the First Amendment. So that's what we were chatting about.
Okay, there's a bit of a kind of a crossover there with the Scotland discussion as well. Although I'm not going to be able to comment on it much because I've not read the article yet. But there was something in the Secularism Today, I think it might have been. I'd have to dig around in my search history to find it. Basically, Scotland are talking about making all their schools, their education system, secular.
Oh.
Oh, wow. That would be, I would like that, but then I'm not there.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, especially since a different direction from where we see the U.S. going, which is you see conservatives trying to find ways to filter money through taxpayers to religious educational institutions in order to basically defund public schools and provide tax breaks to people who want to go to private schools. Religious schools.
Yeah, and that's getting worse under Trump and DeVos. Our education secretary never attended public school. Her kids never attended public school. And she and her family have put millions and millions of dollars into lobbying for vouchers, which is, the way the government would give vouchers to parents to pay for their kids to go to private schools. And in most cases, those private schools are religious schools in the U.S.
I've certainly got the impression that she is wanting to introduce more sort of private education.
Yes.
Is she very religiously motivated as well?
Oh, hell yes. And that's the entirety of her raison d'etre. She's entirely religious.
Yeah. So yeah, again, Scotland is doing, I think, the right thing. Oh, yes, my window's open so you can hear the traffic again. Yeah, I mean, going to secular schools would definitely be taking things in the right direction, because you can still have, as we were pointing out, comparative religious studies.
Mm-hmm.
You just won't have to go and say prayer before you go to class, and you don't get disproportionate amounts of time on your own faith and things. And
well,
also,
you go to church for that, don't you?
yeah, exactly. That's what you go to church for.
Send your kids
Yes.
to church at the weekend. Seems quite obvious.
And Kevin and I were talking about the fact that there were moves to decriminalize abortion too in the UK Parliament.
Oh, right.
Well, no, okay, yeah. So it was just the law in the books. It still requires like 2 doctors to give a woman permission, but it doesn't really match in modern times where people recognize that women can make medical decisions, and you can get abortifacients as pills. So yeah, there's the UK is, for some of its flaws, I'd still prefer to live there than to have to move back to the US. Sorry, like I'm really. I posted this on Facebook, but I assumed always that I would go back to the US to retire, but
Yeah.
now I'm worried that if I want to live in a first world country, I'm gonna have to stay in Germany.
Thanks a lot, Kristi. Now I feel
Sorry.
now I feel even more depressed than I was before.
We'll get your refugee status.
Well, I'm gonna see if my Scottish and English and also Irish grandparents would, having those. I wonder if I'd be able to apply for refugee status in someplace in the UK or Ireland. And also my father was born in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So maybe I can say, well, I'm kind of Canadian.
Yeah, Ted Cruz didn't realize he was Canadian until somebody pointed it out to him. So, and his dad was Canadian, or his mom was Canadian, right?
I think his dad was also a naturalized citizen. Okay, I don't know, but his mom was
his mom was American.
He was American.
Right. His dad was Cuban and Canadian.
Yeah, but his mom got naturalized at some point, and there was a question as to whether it was before or after he was born.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. It's all things. But anyway.
Yeah. Oh, the less I have to think about Ted Cruz.
Yeah. And I would, the more I get to think about Canada, the better. I like Canada. It helps coming from Wisconsin to think about moving to Canada, to deal with the weather. I'm used to it.
Yeah, that part of it will be easy. So, yeah. Guys, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about or go back to? Because we kind of went through Trump and Scottish independence and a facepalm moment. So.
Oh, I missed the facepalm moment. What was the facepalm moment?
Yeah, that was the court case.
Oh, right. Okay.
West Virginia. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I know. Okay. Wisconsin chauvinist here with another Wisconsin person. I don't know how chauvinistic you are about this. Freedom from Religion Foundation is Wisconsin. Wisconsin is playing in the NCAA tournament, basketball tournament now, and we were number 8 seed. We're 1 seed, last year's champion Villanova last night. And so we are going into the Sweet 16, the last 16 teams.
Woo!
Yeah, and from the little bit of reading I got to do before we didn't start at noon. Sorry, couldn't help it. It looks like a lot of people are thinking that Wisconsin is undervalued in our seed. That we really are a much better team and a much stronger team than our seeding would suggest. So I'm guardedly optimistic that we might go a little further in this thing. And the third thing is that other Wisconsin team that's playing now is the Milwaukee Brewers. They're playing in the spring training down in Arizona, and they sucked bad the last 3 years, and this year they are in third place in the Cactus League, um, in the teams playing in Arizona. So, we're doing fairly well in some of these things. So that's my pride.
There you go, Wisconsin pride. Yeah, the whole college sport phenomenon is quite a American thing. And I was wondering, I mean, I'm sure people have studied this and have better answers, but I would imagine part of it is just because America is so big that, because people used to go out and watch local sporting events, right? And then you'd
Right.
have colleges play each other. You'd have natural population centers that created an economy that could support it. And then it became its own little thing, and people would be drafted into, so the system sort of evolved organically. But yeah, like, the rest of, as far as I can see, every other country, they have professional sports. But people get as passionate about college sports as they do. And I mean, I used to have season tickets to Badger hockey games. Civ. And so, and at the end when everyone's saying varsity, I'm like, I didn't graduate from Madison. Like, everyone's an alumni when you come to a Badger game, and so everybody's,
right.
And it's a kind of a cool thing, because what you can have when you love college sports, and you don't have to be American, and I'm sure Kevin Logan would speak up in favor of college sports.
Oh yeah.
It's you have a love of the game. They're playing for the love of the game. They might be looking for a professional career, but when you see professional footballers on the pitch and they're having a temper tantrum, or they're not having a bad night, they're just not doing their jobs, you can get kind of frustrated, because you're like, how many thousands of pounds or euros are you getting for every match, and you're shit. But you just like feel bad for them if they had a bad day, because you feel bad because you know that they're playing because they really want to win. They want to go all the way. They want that championship title. And so there's a kind of purity that I think is probably romanticized, because I'm sure there's a lot more exploitative as people are exposed. But the hope of it is that it's a love of the game rather than just being a professional thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, that's what I was. I don't know. David, if you have any thoughts, sadly, we're kind of getting wrapped up in American sports, which might not be your forte.
No, well, sports generally is not my forte. The only sport a slight interest in is Formula One.
Okay.
So,
yeah, well, in the US, what do you have, like 12? I don't know. The last time I checked, there were like 12 different sports channels. And of course, you have sports year round, whereas, the football season does run from, is it like August until May? So you get football, and then you got rugby and cricket. But in the States, you've got hockey and basketball, and then baseball and football, and those are just the big four. And you get your Formula One and NASCAR
I could
as well.
I could fake more of an allegiance to my home city, who are the current championship holders of the English football leagues.
Yeah, you guys, it was Leicester that went all the way, wasn't it?
All right.
Champions. I don't know what terminology is.
What was that like to live through? Was the city just mad?
I don't know, because I live on a boat outside of Leicester,
Cool.
and I sort of stay kind of as far away from it as I can. Really, it's all a bit hectic, and it's never really been my thing, sport. So, but I do know my sister and my nieces and various other members of my family and friends. We're all, sort of jumping up and down in the seats and thinking it's all the most wonderful thing ever. So I appreciate that, it captivates people, but just doesn't me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it creates a really sense of identity and unity that's so entirely artificial. I mean, people are basically like suddenly identifying with the success of others, and through that, feeling a oneness. It's such a weird thing we do as hairless apes.
Yeah, well, and it goes way back too, because in Rome they had some really serious problems with there were two main chariot teams, they would, they were very passionate, and sometimes they actually got to the point when they were killing the other, members of the team. There would be riots and all that stuff. And then you go back to Greece in the original Olympic Games, and the pride of the city state for their their man who would win a laurel at the games, was very much similar to what we got today. It's a naked ape thing.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they were like the original football hooligans, those guys
Yeah.
at the Coliseum, right?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but that yes, so when we were talking about like Edinburgh and stuff, and then David mentioning that the cities being such a hassle and so bustly and overpowering, that my dad, I think, is much more of like a connect with nature kind of guy. So if he wants to feel a sense of wonder about the world, he'll go out in the middle of nowhere and try to pretend that he's the first person to have ever looked on that particular hilltop or whatever, because he feels that connection with nature. And I realize that I very much feel that connection with human history. Like, I like living in a really old city. I like going past Roman ruins. I like the sense of depth of time, and I can touch a stone that was crafted and put there by hand thousands of years ago. And so, yeah, like, I connect to apes, whereas he connects to nature.
I do like. I mean, that's one thing about sort of Europe in general, that there is a lot of ancient history to absorb yourself in if and when you feel like it. I do like and bits and pieces like that, and the sort of ancient Celtic and Bronze Age monuments and burial mounds and things like that. That's kind of one of my things I like to do.
Yeah.
I was watching on YouTube, someone had put up a documentary with Mary Beard, and she was discussing the history of Rome, and they had collected artifacts from the bottom of the sea back from when like the Romans were fighting against Carthage, and shipping had kind of opened up in the Mediterranean, and sometimes boats went down, and there was a survey that pulled up things including this helmet from a Roman soldier, like the flaps on the sides and everything, sort of the brass, sort of the bronzish color, maybe brass colored, whatever, the helmet. And she's looking at it, kind of turning it over and describing, how it was pulled up, and she sort of popped it on her head. Like, I don't know if another human being has put this on in the last 2,000 years. But it must have had a bigger head than me, or there was a lot of padding, because she was kind of, I was like, oh my gosh, but how amazing would that be to be like the first person to pick up something that was last touched thousands of years ago, and to interact with that. Yeah, like, for me, that's the closest we get to time travel.
Yeah, when I was working in archaeology as a grad student, we often had things like that. I often had emotions like that when I'd find a piece of, like an arrowhead or a knife, a chipped knife, or even bones, human or animal bones, that would have been buried, up to sometimes in Wisconsin, up to 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, and certainly copper from 4,000, 5,000 years ago. And just feeling, just holding those and feeling that, not necessarily that I was the first one to touch them, but there was a connection back to history. And especially chip stone, because I know a little bit about flint knapping, and so I can look at a stone and see how the flint knapper, the original maker of the stone, I can see how he did it or she did it. And I have this sense of, and it's just like frozen there in my hand, and there is something very appealing about that to me.
Yeah, I'm sorry, David. I just want to let you know. It sounds like you're doing dishes, so I've been muting you intermittently, just to let you know.
Yeah, I'm very sorry. I'm frying chicken.
Oh, well, that sounds tasty.
Oh, now you're getting me hungry. Oh man.
Yeah, that's that's why, as an atheist, I really like. Oh, I'm gonna mute you. I really like churches and cathedrals, and to me, they're not. They are sacred places, but not because of supernatural reasons. To me,
Right.
they are testaments to human accomplishment
Right.
and what people were able to do um, when they put their minds to it. It's like the Tower of Babel. You know, the story in the Bible of the Tower of
Hmm.
Babel is that humans could do anything if they set their minds to it. And so, in order to keep them divided, God put foreign languages into their tongues so they couldn't communicate with each other.
Yeah.
Like, what
God
kind
is
of.
sort of a,
He's a dick.
God is, he's a dick. Yeah.
Um, and to kind of walk there knowing it was sort of took 600 years to from start to finish, and the lives that has gone on, those stones have been witness to, how many hundreds of generations, and people's stories and the births and the deaths and the
Mhm.
tragedies and the wonderful things too. And so it's yeah, I think history is way cool.
Yeah. I've been a couple times to the Washington National Cathedral, the Episcopal Church Cathedral in DC. And they started building that, I think, around the turn of the century, shortly after the turn of the century. And I think they just finished it recently. And they actually had an apprentice program, a stonemason apprentice program, where they taught inner city kids how to carve stone, gargoyles and finials and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so they had a stone yard in back of the church where they were doing this. And I remember visiting that and thinking, this is a connection to the medieval cathedrals. This really we have more math and computers and things like that now, but the work is done the same way. You
Yeah.
take a mallet and a chisel and you go at stone.
I think when I was I got really into Hamilton, the musical, and watched a lot of the
Yeah.
documentaries. And for part of it, Lin-Manuel Miranda, went to one of the, I think it was maybe Aaron Burr's living quarters in one of the sort of museums, and he would write in there or whatever. And
Hmm.
I think part of the reason that at least the founders don't, I know that that's sort of deep American history for Americans, because it was like almost, going on 300 years ago or something. Um, and but for me, the founders don't feel that far away because they
Yeah.
thought pretty much like we do. They would be, if you went to Benjamin Franklin and explained to him how a computer worked, he might not get it all, but he wouldn't be completely freaked out by it because he would
Right.
have an understanding of electricity and the idea of
Right.
machines and stuff. But the farther back you go, the more different I imagine the people who lived in those times are like. So like the worldview of Mary Queen of Scots, she might have been going through the same child labor pains that every woman goes through, but I don't think I could relate to her, in the way that I could to
Yeah.
say, John Adams' wife in sort of way. And so they feel at once there's so many things that connect us to the people of history, and yet they were so different. The farther back you go, the sort of more different I think they are, just because of their worldviews, not because of their capacities, but because the
Hmm.
kinds of things that they saw in the world would be just really
Right.
difficult for us to relate to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I was
Yeah, David.
just going to say that Stonehenge was supposed to be some kind of or something, is what it's reckoned. And the people who built Stonehenge, they knew what they were doing, obviously.
Hmm.
Why haul several hundreds all the way across the country to plant them in a field somewhere if you don't know why you're doing it? But
Hmm.
for them to try and deduce from the evidence that we see what they were actually intending from it, I mean, it's as hard
Hmm.
for us to understand that
Right.
as it would be for them to understand, well, you could just install an app on your phone to do that now,
Right.
couldn't you? you know, it's the connection barrier goes two ways. The communication barrier, sorry.
Yeah, that is right.
Yeah, very much so. I think, it would be amazing to see. Well, I'm sure most people throughout history, if they came to the 21st century, would be utterly horrified.
Yeah.
at what they saw, because especially, let's say, Western Europeans, like, let's say, from Rome up to, including the Scandinavian countries, it would be such culture shock. Women walking around in pants and short hair, and men
Mhm.
taking their kids out, and yeah, just, our focus on money rather than on um, honor or glory. Like, our
Yeah.
value system would be so weird to them, because we derive our worth generically through our status and our wealth. And before, they would do status in terms of class, as well as,
Mhm.
your conquests.
Mhm.
So yeah. I'm sure they would think we were terribly degenerate and soft.
Well, if they came, if they time traveled to right now, they might, and looked at what was going on in the U.S., they might. That's interesting. I wonder what they would think of Trump in the America First stuff. I think a lot of people might think that's just right. And this movement back to religion, religion and the government, I think might make quite a lot of sense to them. They're wrong, of course, but
Right.
oh well.
Um,
Uh,
all right. Well, we're getting on, I think, yeah, about 90 minutes. Well, a little bit more, because we started a bit early.
yeah.
But this has been a lovely chat.
Hmm.
We can also chat a little bit more when we get off air, but in terms of the recording, I think, if we start going into more just personal chit chat, that we can do that on our own, without
Yeah.
subjecting everybody to that kind of thing. So you
Yeah.
guys, I'm gonna wrap up the recorded part, but don't go anywhere. So for those of you who managed to make it all the way to the end of the hangout, thanks. We really appreciate having you here, and we hope you enjoyed it. And I'll give each of my patrons, thank you again for your support, a chance to say goodbye to everyone. So first, say bye, Tom.
Bye.
You didn't say bye, Tom. I kind of like that. And David, you want to wish
Yeah.
well to the audience?
Yeah. Thanks and bye,
Right.
I guess.
Thanks and bye. Yes. Not quite as catchy as Michael Rollins. I'm trying to encourage him to sign off always by saying "later, cucks," but he hasn't done it yet.
I'm new to this. I've not got a catchphrase yet, so
Yeah, we have to work on that for next month.
yeah.
All right, guys. I've been Kristi. You have been awesome. I'll talk to you all again. I will talk to you all again really soon. Bye bye.